Good evening. I'm Stephanie Ruhle.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to those who are hoping that Kanye West would be the one to take out Donald Trump, apparently not going to happen.
Not today.
Kanye West, you know what? I'll never say bad about him. You know why? Because he loves Trump.
Not just LA. I like Trump. Do you like Heilemann? You like Heilemann?
Do I like Heilemann?
You like
CH?
All right. Happy National U.S. Bowling League Day, sports fans. On our show tonight, a religious liberty roll call and Scott Walker's national anthem. But first, Donald Trump's Pledge of Allegiance. The Donald held a press conference at Trump Tower today after meeting with RNC Chairman Reince Priebus and said that he had signed a pledge not to run as a third-party candidate if he loses his Republican nomination bid. Meanwhile, our colleagues at Bloomberg Business Week have a new cover story out today about Trump's business acumen. Stephanie, you and I have both read this fantastic piece by our friend Max
Abelson, one of my faves.
He is fabulous in every way. I want to know, though, after reading it now and digging deep into Trump's business background, are you more impressed or less impressed with him as a capitalist?
I wasn't impressed with him as a capitalist to begin with. Listen, he is this extraordinary American story. He almost makes me think of Dynasty. Ready? The opulence, the grandeur in the 80s. Ivana, Marla Maples, Melania, all of it. But if you actually take it down, when you think about why these Americans love this American icon businessman for talking turkey, baloney. But he's not an iconic American businessman.
Well, he's iconic in the sense that a lot of Americans, if you go around and talk to American voters, a lot of them think of Trump as an icon of capitalism. What's interesting, though, is that they all think he's built a lot of stuff. And what this story shows you is that Trump once was trying to be a builder. He's no longer a builder. He's now a brander, and I think the FCC will not stop me when I say a bullshit artist. He's kind of fantastic at those things. He spins yarn. He's still a great. He's got the golf courses. He's got his name on a lot of stuff. He's rich. But what he's not is a builder or a job creator.
He's a licensing genius. That's what he has done. Listen, people like him for that. Good for him. But in terms of what could this guy do as president, yikes.
Yes, and the interesting thing, he often says, you know, so-and-so only has had one or two people work for them, 3 or 4. I've created tens of thousands of jobs.
Baloney.
Before he went bankrupt, he created some jobs. After the bankruptcies and all that stuff, he didn't go personally bankrupt, but after his troubles financially, now that he's just a licensor, I don't think there's a lot of, employment beams. He's not GM.
He is not creating jobs. But you know who's created his success in terms of this election? The Republican Party, who has done nothing. Because Republicans out there are saying, we need somebody with a voice who's going to speak his mind. And clearly, that's what the guy is doing.
Did you hear that bell?
I heard the bell.
You know what that bell means?
I have to take you down.
It's time for you to read.
Oh, time for me to read. That's hard for us girls. Kim Davis, the county clerk in Kentucky who refused to issue marriage licenses for same-sex couples, was jailed, listen to me, indefinitely for contempt today by a federal judge. Republican 2016 presidential candidates have been weighing in on both sides of this issue. Some call her brave for standing up for her beliefs. Others say she should follow the law of the land. John, purely in terms of politics, we've heard everybody come out with their views on this. Who has the most to gain from their response?
Well, look, there's 2 clear camps, and they're not surprising, right? You got Huckabee, Jindal, Cruz, Rand Paul. They're all saying this is a disgrace. They're all on her side. On the other side, you got John Kasich.
Hold on. Not this is a disgrace for what she said. It's a disgrace that's been jailed.
Well, no. They think that she should be allowed. No, those people on the far right, on the conservative, Christian conservative side, they think that she should be allowed to defy the Supreme Court. They think she's right on the merits. They're not talking about the punishment.
Okay, I just want to break
And
it
then
down.
you got Huckabee, then you got Kasich, Fiorina, Lindsey Graham, Chris Christie, all saying the Supreme Court, it's the law of the land. You work for the government. You got to issue these licenses. I think, funnily enough, for some of these people who are on the farther right, although I think they're wrong on the substance, they have something to gain politically in the sense that everybody is trying to figure out how to get to those evangelical voters, and Trump has taken up so much space. This is an issue where a guy like Huckabee can get a lot of airtime. He's going to actually go down to Kentucky and stand with Kim. The question I have for you is the thing you raised, though, which is, whatever you think of her stance on this, jail time indefinitely for life?
There you have it. Maybe this woman should lose her job. I mean, in my opinion, definitely. You should not put your political or religious beliefs ahead of what your job is. You just shouldn't have that job. But let me tell you, being jailed indefinitely, is there not something better to do for the state of Kentucky? Put this woman in jail? Come on now.
I mean, look, she is being held in contempt of court. There has to be a punishment for that. But to my mind, let's fine her. Let's fire her.
Let's find her. I'd rather not have my tax dollars keeping her in jail.
Right.
She can spend her own dollars and get fined. Thanks.
Oh, that is smart economic sense. I know now why you're
There you
like
go.
in the business.
Uh-oh,
you're
ding,
in.
ding, ding. You better go.
Ding, ding, ding goes whatever. All right.
Raleigh, are you doing a show too?
I'm trying.
Oh my God.
I'm trying my best. As
Here
Scott
goes
Walker tries to reboot his campaign, he's also getting a big boost from his super PAC. Today, the group unveiled a new ad that will be part of a $7 million buy that starts in Iowa next week, and it highlights Walker's most important political credential.
Madison, Wisconsin, 2011. Big government union bosses lead thousands of liberal activists in protest against Governor Scott Walker's bold reforms. They storm the Capitol, threaten his safety, even try to recall him. But Scott Walker never backs down.
All right, so on the other side of the political aisle, there's Joe Biden, the vice president, who's fueling political chatter about his presidential aspirations by marching in a Labor Day parade with AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka. So, Stephanie, this is a traditional thing. Republicans bash unions, Democrats cozy up to the unions. Who has more to gain, though, politically or financially, from those different ways of approaching the union issue?
The whole thing is tiring because why Americans are so frustrated is because they want political leaders to simply stand up for what they believe in, not weigh in, I mean, Hillary Clinton style, what makes people like me more?
Right.
How about being a candidate who just stands up for what you believe?
Well, I think there's ideological. These people are actually kind of doing what they believe, what their ideology tells them to do. You know, the unions have been the great bogey for Republicans for a long time. They spend a lot of money. They support Democratic candidates. In this video, in the Scott Walker ad, they look like ISIS, like storming some Middle Eastern city.
Yes.
But the Republicans, I think, their position of bashing them is actually more politically and financially advantageous in this sense. A lot of rich people, and I think you know some of them.
Without a doubt.
8 unions of any kind, and they will write a big check to a guy like Scott Walker, who's famous for crushing unions.
Carl Icahn did not go to Atlantic City, did not rescue casinos specifically because unions stood in his way. He said, if these employees and these casinos are willing to step out of their union contracts, I will hire them. Because they wouldn't, he said, go fish.
You got a lot of, and one of the interesting things is that it is almost ecumenical. You get these rich guys. Well, you get Democratic rich people, even the Democratic rich people like Democrats hate the unions.
Well, it stands in their way. Listen, if you're a super rich person, you do not want anything roadblocking you.
All right, she's awesome. Up next,
he used the word, what was it?
Up next, my interview with the potential 2016 presidential candidate who says he will resign as soon as, if and when, he reaches the White House. We'll be right back with that after these messages. There is only one person eyeing the Oval Office who would make campaign finance reform his only issue on the trail. That's Lawrence Lessig, the Harvard law professor and political activist who announced earlier this month that he's exploring a bid for the Democratic nomination. Lessig says he'll jump in if he can raise $1 million by Labor Day, and he's getting close. With just a couple days left, he's got around $780,000 in the bank. I sat down with Lessig recently and asked him why he is doing what he is doing. Explain the nature of the kind of campaign you're going to run. You've called it, you would be a referendum president. What does that mean?
Right. So this issue, we know from polling, 1 million different sources, that if we had a referendum on this issue, there's no doubt we would win.
This issue being?
The corruption of this political system. The fact that...
Because of big money.
Because of big money, all sorts of ways in which we've defiled the basic commitment of a representative democracy, which is equal citizens. We don't have equal citizens anymore in any sense. We are not a representative democracy. So that idea is an idea which, if confronted, the American people would say, hell no. I want to change that back. So if we had a referendum on that, we would win. But we don't have a referendum power at the federal level. We have it in some states, but not at the federal level. So I thought, why don't we have a referendum president, somebody who says, I am the referendum. It's not me, it's the idea. It's what we would do. And if I'm elected, I would do everything I could to pass that law, and once it's passed, I would step down and my vice president would become president. So it's kind of 2 for the price of 1 president candidate.
So that makes the choice of your running mate rather important. How early will you announce that selection?
So I have people I would love to see as a running mate, but I think the decision's got to be made at the time of the convention based on who can make it certain that this ticket could win. So people, who I think have been articulating the values of the Democratic Party in a really clear and consistent way have been inspiring the base of the Democratic Party. So Bernie has clearly done that. Elizabeth Warren has clearly done that. These are the kinds of people, I think, who could rally the party enough to actually win, and win with a mandate enough to do the thing that you have told me since the beginning of the time I've known you is impossible, which is to take on the power in Washington, this corrupted power, and actually reform it.
How do you explain now your love affair with Barack Obama when he was doing the very thing that you find so corrupting and so immoral?
I don't see anything wrong with living by the rules of the game in order to get to office to change the rules of the game.
Yes.
I don't believe in unilateral disarmament, but I believed in Barack Obama. I was excited about Barack Obama because he went all across the country talking about the corrupting influence of money inside the system. The lobbyists were the problem in the system. If we don't change the way Washington works, then none of the reforms will matter for the rest of it. And he was right about that. But the problem is, when he got to Washington, I imagine there was a conversation with Rahm Emanuel where he said, look, I want to take on this corrupt system. And Rahm's like, that is not going to happen. I've talked to Heilemann. Heilemann says it can't happen. So this is not going to happen. Let's get on to the other issues. And so he gave up the mandate, the moral mandate I think he had that would have been extraordinarily powerful to try to bring about this change. And that was a big mistake.
So if a candidate like Barack Obama ran while collecting a vast amount of money to play within the existing system and promising then to change the system and then doing nothing to change the system, if that candidate, who you invested so much hope in, turned out to be untrustworthy on this issue, why is any candidate ever going to be trustworthy on this issue, including you?
Well, because Barack Obama and any other candidate can get elected and then, after having a number of important successes, define his administration in terms of the successes. And I think Obama, in the terms of turning the administration into the best it could possibly be, has been a brilliant president from that standpoint. But I will only succeed if I succeed. There's nothing else to measure me against except whether I got this legislation passed in a speedy time to make it so that, in fact, this is a referendum presidency. So there's no wiggle room for me. It's not like I can say, yeah, but I pardoned a bunch of people, or I went to Afghanistan as a president. It's this or nothing.
Let me ask you this question, totally practical question. If you qualify for the Democratic debates and you find yourself on stage with Martin O'Malley and maybe Jim Webb and certainly Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, your tactic will be what? You will turn every single question into a question about this, or will you debate the policy towards Iran, debate policy about health care? Will you become a sufficient expert on that wide array of policy areas that you will take on those issues and develop a full-blown platform?
Wait, you know I'm an expert in all those issues, right?
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
No, but absolutely, I have to take on those issues in the debate.
You'll be a full spectrum Democratic candidate.
Absolutely. But the point is, it's incredibly important to tie every one of those issues back to this equality point. Now, some of them are just outside of the scope. And, you've got to acknowledge it, and I've got to be able to talk about it on the merits and recognize that people are electing people on the basis of what they expect are going to happen in the context of an emergency, and that's totally appropriate. That's exactly the right kind of question. But, if I were the referendum president, I would be a kind of trustee for two different interests. One, I'd be a trustee for the people, to say, we're going to get this bill passed, and as soon as I get this passed, I step down. Second, I'd be a trustee for the vice president, because the vice president is the one who's going to become president, and that person then has, some job. I have some job to make sure that the administration reflects his or her judgment about the way things ought to be. But I am, in the end, the president. I am the person who needs to make the judgments and make the calls, and that's what I would have to do on the debate stages.
All right, that's my very last question for you. I believe many people who are your friends and your foes will describe this endeavor with one word: quixotic. Do you reject that label or embrace it?
I don't think this will be quixotic, but I would say, even if it were quixotic, even if it were 1 out of a million chance, if you believe this is the most important moral issue of the time, and the only price I pay is, people make fun of me and maybe personal bankruptcy. But okay, those two prices, the only price I pay is that in order to have a chance at moving the needle on the most important moral issue of the day, absolutely. I'm happy to embrace whatever chance it takes. Now, I actually think that people are so frustrated that this is not quixotic, that in fact people will rally in a way they've rallied in other contexts. But if they don't, and it turns out to be just moving the needle and getting this issue up into the center of the debates, that's enough for me.
Our thanks to Lawrence Lessig. When we come back, a new film about the Black Panthers, their party, their movement. My conversation with the director of that movie after this.
The Second Amendment guarantees the citizen a right to bear arms on public property.
We're going to carry our guns and we're going to follow the police. We're going to maintain a legal distance, ready to throw down if necessary.
Anyone who would approve of this kind of demonstration must be out of their mind.
That was a clip from the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, which premiered yesterday here in Gotham City. I sat down with the Emmy Award-winning director, Stanley Nelson. I asked him what led him to chronicle the rise and fall of the Black Panther Party.
I was 15 or 16 years old when the Panthers came into being, so I saw this thing arise, you know, this whole different way of looking, different way of being, and I was fascinated by it. As I got into filmmaking, I just thought this was an incredible story that hadn't been told, you know, with great larger-than-life characters. It was a story that really wasn't known. There was great footage and music and stills, and so it seemed like a perfect topic to make a film on.
Right. When you think about that moment in the mid to late 60s, right, where the transformation of the civil rights movement, the kind of splintering of it, you now have the Black Power movement, Stokely Carmichael, that stuff kind of giving rise to a more radicalized view. Talk about what was going on in Oakland when the Black Panthers started, how it arose. I think it's how the movement started, because I think it's of particular relevance to some of the discussions we're having today in America.
Sure. The Panthers started in 1966 in Oakland, California, and the Oakland police were notoriously brutal to the African-American community. And the Panthers really were just a group of guys who were in college and said, you know, we have to do something about this. So they formed a group, and they called themselves the Black Panthers. And what they did was they decided that they would police the police. Because in California at that time, you could carry a loaded weapon as long as you carried it in the open.
Right.
So they would follow the police when the police would jump out to do a traffic stop or to confront somebody on the street. The Panthers would jump out behind the police, stay 10, 20 feet away, and just make sure that there was no violence that occurred in the stop.
There was a period, right, from 66 to 70, 71, when the group was probably at its peak at that point, and it was in 60, 70 cities around the country, where there were a lot of people in authority in America who considered them a great threat. J. Edgar Hoover among them, who said they were, the greatest threat to internal security in America. What was it that was so threatening, given the initial inspiration for the group, which was just to monitor the police and make sure that police brutality didn't take place? What happened in those 4 years that caused so much of white law enforcement and the white power structure to freak out about the Black Panthers?
Well, I think one of the things is the Panthers were in some ways a victim of their own success. So the image that first came to the public was these black men with guns, that they had in Oakland. But that really didn't last long, because very quickly after that, they changed the law in California that said, okay, you can't carry a gun.
Perhaps there was some relationship between those two things.
Little. So after that, the Panthers really kind of changed in a lot of ways. But that was the image that was in people's mind. And I think even worse, that was the image that was in J. Edgar Hoover's mind, the director of the FBI, who really just went ballistic and kind of went all out in doing anything he could to destroy the Panthers.
You talked about the great characters in this movie, so let's just talk real quickly about some of these characters who really were incredibly glamorous in some ways at one point. Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton, Eldridge Cleaver. To talk about those bigger-than-life characters and how they were received by kind of pop culture consciousness in America at the time.
Well, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale really were the founders of the party. They were in college, and Huey Newton was kind of a real intellectual, just a brilliant guy. But Huey Newton was, Huey Newton was beyond handsome. Huey Newton was beautiful. I mean, Huey Newton was just, just incredibly charismatic, incredibly good-looking. But he went to jail early on in a shootout that happened with an Oakland police officer and was in jail. And so nobody saw Huey, but there arose this huge Free Huey movement, and everybody knew Free Huey, although people didn't know who Huey was. Exactly. Bobby Seale had this incredible personality. Bobby Seale had been an entertainer. Bobby Seale was just somebody that you liked and loved and was a great spokesperson. Eldridge Cleaver joins the party, and Eldridge Cleaver had just gotten out of jail.
Right.
But Eldridge Cleaver had written this book, Soul on Ice, while in prison. And the book was on the top 10 of the New York Times bestsellers. So all of a sudden you have this guy who's this literary star who says, you know, I'm going to join this group. Right. And so that, you know, also helped to kind of increase the mystique of the Black Panthers.
You know, you talked about how the group changed, and obviously they started doing other things. They started doing, like a lot of groups on the left, they started having caring about community health and education and other things in inner city areas. But again, the image of them was very powerful, right? And you know, I think for a lot of people, one of the most famous kind of things in literary, political, social literary journalism is when Tom Wolfe wrote about Radical Chic, and the Leonard Bernstein fundraiser for the Black Panthers here in New York City in around 1970 or so. What was it about the Panthers that was so seductive, in your view, to certain segments of the American white left?
I think, look, I think the Panthers were seductive to everybody. You know, they were great at using the media. You know, they had this look that we had never seen before. You know, the traditional civil rights movement was Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy. It was very church-based, you know, suit and tie, very buttoned up. But here are black men and women with big afros and berets and leather jackets and sunglasses and looking cool. And the other thing I think that is hard to grasp is that we had never seen, nobody had ever seen a black man, you know, with his finger pointed in a white man's face. Right. You know, look, you've got to do this. We had never seen that. I mean, in the history of the country, you could be killed for that. But that's who the Panthers were. It was a whole different aggressive attitude that people hadn't seen. And I think it was seductive for a lot of different groups.
I mean, one of the most striking things of this summer to me has been the incredible success, kind of an unexpected success, of the movie Straight Outta Compton. What's the through line for you between this movie and where we are right now in terms of some of the very same issues that the Black Panthers were confronting in the late 60s and that African-American communities are facing now with the police?
Sure. Well, the Black Panthers started 50 years ago, almost exactly 50 years ago this year. And they started as a result of police brutality, as a way to confront this police brutality that was going on in the African-American community. We're 50 years later, and we're still in the same place. And I think that part of the reason why we're in the same place is because that's never been healed. You know, it's just we're still in the same place. It was never rectified. And so here we are in the exact same place, and we've got groups that are again saying this is something we have to do for ourselves. You know, we can't wait. Black lives, we're losing black lives. We are losing them, and how do we correct that ourselves? And I think that's really important.
When we come back, Deflategate. A federal judge sided with New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady today, erasing the NFL's 4-game suspension over Deflategate. Stephanie, Tom Brady, lying, cheating scumbag, or American hero?
Or hot piece of ass. Great American hero. Listen, extraordinary football player. I mean, who's lost here? Seriously? Roger Goodell. Like, Roger Goodell, was it worth it? Was it worth it to go to the mat over this?
All right. That just smoked everything. We are live 24/7 on BloombergPolitics.com. We're on the tube twice a day at 5 and at 8. Until tomorrow, for me and Stephanie, sayonara.